The moment the flight attendant told him to leave, the entire cabin fell into a stunned silence. But no one could have predicted what would happen next. Jeremiah Walker was just 16, dressed in his favorite black hoodie, sneakers, and jeans. Nothing out of the ordinary. Yet as he sat calmly in his first-class seat, a flight attendant stormed down the aisle, stopping right next to him. "Sir, you're going to have to remove that hoodie, or you'll need to leave the plane," she said sharply, her voice cold and uncompromising. Jeremiah looked up, his eyes steady but confused. "Excuse me? It's just a hoodie." Her gaze hardened. "The airline has a dress code, and we don't allow attire that appears threatening or out of place." Passengers nearby watched, sensing something was off. Jeremiah never argued. He simply began to unzip the hoodie, but before he could finish, she insisted he step off the plane immediately. Heart pounding, Jeremiah gathered his belongings and silently exited, his dignity wounded. Whispers of judgment and disgust trailed behind him as the plane doors closed. But Jeremiah held a secret, when no one aboard had the slightest idea of. He owned the airline. Weeks earlier, Jeremiah had taken control of one of the fastest-growing commercial airlines in the country. Built from his own vision, hard work, and financial savvy, Phoenix Air was now his empire. Yet today, as he stood alone on the jet bridge, the same prejudices he sought to dismantle had blinded the very people working for him. Determined not to be defined by ignorance or bias, Jeremiah made a decision. He returned to the gate, walking straight into the manager's office with quiet confidence. "I am Jeremiah Walker," he announced. "I am the owner of Phoenix Air, and I was just removed from my own flight for wearing a hoodie." The room fell silent. The management, the flight attendants, all had to confront their own assumptions and mistakes. What followed was a series of apologies, policy revisions, and a company-wide initiative to address implicit bias. Jeremiah's story soon spread far beyond the airport, a powerful reminder that often those who were judged the harshest wield the greatest power to change the world. In the end, a hoodie wasn't just clothing. It was a symbol of prejudice confronted, barriers broken, and a young man rewriting the rules of an industry that almost rejected him. As Jeremiah turned from the gate manager's office, his mind raced, not with anger, but with purpose. Turning a personal injustice into a catalyst for change, he knew this moment was bigger than him. Back in his private office, overlooking the Phoenix Air headquarters, Jeremiah sat down and typed out a company-wide email. He wrote about respect, dignity, and accountability, reminding every employee, from pilots to flight attendants, that their actions reflected not just a company policy, but deeply held values. The hoodie incident was not isolated. It was a symptom of a deeper problem, and it demanded immediate attention. The next morning, the entire staff gathered for an unexpected meeting. Jeremiah stood at the front, no longer just the young owner, but a leader demanding transformation. "I am here today not just as your CEO, but as someone who experienced firsthand how prejudice can harm us all," he said. "From this moment forward, Phoenix Air will be a place where respect is not optional, where assumptions don't replace understanding." Soon, new training programs were developed focusing on cultural sensitivity and implicit bias, ensuring incidents like the one that humiliated Jeremiah would never happen again. His story sparked conversations throughout the industry, some uncomfortable but necessary. Meanwhile, the flight attendant, Linda, found herself reflecting on her actions. Watching the news stories breaking about Jeremiah's rise and the airline's reform, she reached out with a heartfelt apology. When Jeremiah accepted, she became one of the strongest advocates in the company for growth and change. But Jeremiah's journey wasn't without struggle. Public attention brought scrutiny and pressure. Some questioned if his youth could sustain the leadership needed. Yet, every challenge strengthened his resolve. Months later, invited to a national conference on diversity and inclusion in business, Jeremiah shared his story publicly the day he was kicked off his own plane, the lessons learned, and his vision for equality beyond corporate walls. As he spoke, his words resonated widely. "We can't change the world by ignoring our biases. True progress begins when we acknowledge them, confront them, and create space for everyone to fly free, no matter what they wear or where they come from." From that day forward, Phoenix Air was more than an airline. It became a symbol of possibility, courage, and the power to rewrite the narrative. And Jeremiah? He soared higher than any plane he owned, proving that sometimes the biggest journeys start with a single moment of injustice. Jeremiah's speech at the national conference marked a turning point, not just for Phoenix Air, but for him personally. Invitations poured in from schools, organizations, and media outlets wanting to hear his story. Each opportunity was a chance to inspire change, to dismantle the walls of prejudice one conversation at a time. Back at the airline, Jeremiah worked tirelessly with his leadership team to implement a new company culture rooted in respect and empathy. Employees were encouraged to share their experiences and ideas, while a strict zero-tolerance policy against discrimination was enforced. The changes were not always easy, and some staff resisted, but Jeremiah's unwavering commitment led to steady progress. One afternoon, while visiting a Phoenix Air customer service center, Jeremiah encountered a young flight attendant named Maya. She had been inspired by his story and was determined to be part of the positive change. They spoke about the challenges of confronting bias and the importance of humility and growth. "You showed us that courage doesn't always roar," Maya said quietly. "Sometimes it's the calm in the storm, the choice to stand tall even when the world doubts you." Jeremiah smiled, feeling a deep sense of hope. That's how progress begins, one brave step at a time. Months later, Phoenix Air's efforts caught the attention of industry leaders and advocacy groups. The airline received awards for diversity and inclusion, becoming a role model for others. More importantly, passengers began sharing stories of kindness, respect, and genuine care, proof that real change was taking flight. As Jeremiah looked out from his office window one evening, illuminated by the glow of city lights and the distant hum of planes taking off, he knew the journey was far from over. But for the first time, he felt the world was moving closer to the truth he'd always believed. Dignity and justice are the true destinations every person deserves. Jeremiah's leadership continued to reshape Phoenix Air into an airline synonymous with progress and respect. Yet, beyond corporate success, the young man's journey was also deeply personal. One rainy evening, months after his public speech, Jeremiah received a letter from a high school near his hometown. It was from a student named Malik, who wrote about growing up feeling unseen and stereotyped because of his appearance. Reading Malik's words, Jeremiah was reminded of that humiliating day on the plane, the whispering doubts, the wrongful assumptions made against him simply because of a hoodie. The letter was a call to action. Within weeks, Jeremiah launched the Phoenix Youth Initiative, a scholarship and mentorship program aimed at supporting young people of color with leadership potential. The program offered internships at the airline, workshops on entrepreneurship, and a safe community to nurture dreams. The first cohort of students arrived at Phoenix Air's headquarters full of hope and nervous excitement. Jeremiah personally welcomed them, sharing stories not just of his victories, but of the obstacles and biases he'd faced. "We won't pretend the world is fair," he told them, "but what we can do is build our own wings. We can fly higher than the limits others try to put on us." One afternoon, during a mentorship session, Malik asked Jeremiah, "Did you ever feel like you didn't belong?" Jeremiah nodded thoughtfully. "More times than I can count. But I learned that belonging isn't about fitting in, it's about owning who you are. And yes, even wearing a hoodie if that's what you choose." The program flourished, inspiring dozens of young leaders, fueling dreams, and sparking change far beyond the airline. Jeremiah's story had started as a shocking lesson about prejudice, but it had grown into a movement of hope and empowerment. And while the scars of that day at the airport never fully faded, Jeremiah carried them as a reminder that sometimes the greatest power is transforming pain into purpose. As the Phoenix Youth Initiative blossomed, Jeremiah found himself reflecting on the profound impact one seemingly small event had sparked. The hoodie incident, once a source of hurt and frustration, had become a catalyst for change not just within his airline but across communities he'd never imagined reaching. But with growth came new challenges. Some industry veterans whispered doubts about a teenager steering a major airline, while skeptics in the media questioned whether his reforms were more than just a public relations stunt. Jeremiah knew that to truly lead, he needed more than passion. He needed resilience and a clear vision. One evening, as he prepared for another round of interviews, Jeremiah's phone buzzed. On the screen was a message from Linda, the flight attendant who had asked him to leave the plane months before. "I want to meet and talk. I realize now how wrong I was. Can we?" Jeremiah hesitated but agreed. The next day, over coffee, Linda poured out her regrets, sharing how the encounter had unsettled her deeply. She spoke of the difficult conversations she faced with colleagues and the transformation she'd undergone since. "I was part of the problem," she admitted, voice trembling, "but I want to be part of the solution." Jeremiah saw in her the possibility of true change. When people confront uncomfortable truths and commit to growth, together, they worked to create an internal program at Phoenix Air where employees could discuss biases openly. fostering empathy and understanding across the company. As months passed, the airline's culture shifted visibly. Passengers noted friendlier, more thoughtful service. Employee turnover dropped. Jeremiah's leadership was no longer questioned but celebrated. Yet, through it all, Jeremiah never forgot why he started, the day he was kicked off his own plane for a hoodie. It was a stark reminder of prejudice's persistence and the urgent need for change. Standing before a crowd at a global aviation summit, Jeremiah spoke with steady passion, eyes bright. Prejudice tries to ground us. But when we rise above it, we don't just reclaim our seats, we change the course of the entire flight. The applause was thunderous. Jeremiah smiled, knowing this was only the beginning. Months after the summit, Jeremiah's vision unfolded beyond Phoenix Air. His story, now a beacon for social change, reached the ears of policymakers and activists alike. Invitations poured in panel discussions, community forums, even legislative hearings where his insight was sought on combating systemic bias. Yet Jeremiah remained grounded. One afternoon, returning to the city after visiting his youth initiative, he spotted a young boy sitting alone near the airport terminal, wearing a worn hoodie and clutching a backpack. Memories of his own vulnerable teenage days flooded back. He approached gently. "Hey there, what's your name?" The boy looked up, wary but curious. "Darius." Jeremiah smiled. "Darius, I've been where you are. It's not always easy to feel seen or safe. But trust me, you belong here. And you have the power to change your story." That moment crystallized everything Jeremiah had fought for. His journey had become cyclical, from being judged for a hoodie to inspiring the next generation to wear theirs with pride. From the terminal to the boardroom, from adversity to empowerment, Jeremiah Walker's flight was far from over. He was not just the owner of an airline. He was the pilot steering countless lives toward a future where everyone could soar without fear. The sky was the limit, and at last, the world was ready to fly. The air was thick with anticipation as Jeremiah stepped into the expansive conference hall packed with industry leaders, social activists, journalists, and young entrepreneurs. The Phoenix Air logo glowed behind him on a massive screen, symbolizing not just a company, but a movement. Tonight, Jeremiah was to receive the Changemaker Award, an honor recognizing those who had pushed boundaries and reshaped narratives. But away from the applause and flashing cameras, Jeremiah remained reflective. His journey from a 16-year-old kicked off his own plane for wearing a hoodie to a visionary leader was still unfolding, and its challenges were far from over. He remembered that day too vividly. The cold gaze of the flight attendant, the murmurs of the passengers, the sharp sting of humiliation as he was escorted from the very plane he owned. The hoodie was just fabric, yet it symbolized a barrier built from years of prejudice and assumptions, walls that had to be torn down. Determined to change things, Jeremiah had launched the Phoenix Youth Initiative, a program to mentor young people like him, often judged by society before they could even speak. It gave scholarships, internships at the airline, and leadership workshops, creating a sanctuary of hope and empowerment. But with progress came resistance. Some of Phoenix Air's longtime employees bristled at the sudden changes. They whispered in back halls about kids making decisions. Old-school managers called the diversity programs distractions, and some flight attendants grumbled about new training requirements. The media scrutinized Jeremiah, questioning whether a teenager could genuinely lead a large-scale airline. When the headlines questioned his capability, Jeremiah stayed even-keeled. Leadership, he knew, was more than managing airplanes and schedules. It was about managing people's hearts and minds. One afternoon, Linda, the flight attendant who had once asked him to remove his hoodie, approached him after a company meeting. She was nervous, her usual confident demeanor replaced by humility. "I want to apologize," she said. "That day, I judged you unfairly. You opened my eyes, not just to my biases, but to how Phoenix Air can be better." Jeremiah smiled, seeing in her the change he wanted for the whole company. "Thank you, Linda. It's not just about apologies, it's about what we do next." Together, they helped launch an internal dialogue group, where employees could share stories and experiences about biases they faced or exhibited. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Meanwhile, back at the Phoenix Youth Initiative, Jeremiah continued to pour energy into mentoring the first cohort of students. Malik, one of the scholarship recipients, spoke often of the courage Jeremiah inspired. "Sometimes I feel like people see my hoodie and make decisions about me before they know me," Malik confided one day during a workshop. "But you showed me it's okay to own who you are, even if they don't understand." Jeremiah nodded knowingly. It's not about changing yourself to fit their ideas. It's about changing their ideas. One of the stories that stuck with Jeremiah most was from a young girl named Aisha. She dreamed of becoming a pilot since she was 5 but felt pushed aside on account of her age and background. Through the initiative, she earned her internship and began flight training under Phoenix Air's guidance, a testament to the doors opened by persistence and belief. As the initiative gained momentum, so too did Jeremiah's efforts to reshape Phoenix Air's corporate culture. He insisted that policies be transparent and fair, that dress code guidelines be reasonable and respectful of individual expression, and that diversity be celebrated rather than tolerated. He also struck partnerships with civil rights organizations, sponsoring events and providing funding to support communities historically marginalized in the aviation industry. Despite the triumphs, Jeremiah faced moments of doubt. The weight of responsibility, the glare of public attention, and occasional backlash tested his resolve. Media outlets sometimes sensationalized the Hoodie incident as a mere PR stunt or questioned whether a teenager could truly get it done. Yet every time he felt the pressure, Jeremiah reminded himself why he started. One particularly challenging day came when a viral video surfaced showing another passenger, a young black man, being similarly treated unjustly by airline staff elsewhere. It was a painful echo of Jeremiah's own experience, proving that prejudice was far from erased in the skies. He responded swiftly, announcing a coalition of airlines committed to anti-discrimination training and sharing best practices. He spoke at press conferences, urging competitors to join forces in the fight for equality. Flying should be a human right, not a privilege granted to those who fit an outdated mold, he declared passionately. The industry took notice. Phoenix Air emerged as a pioneer, and Jeremiah as a leader whose influence extended well beyond his company. Amid the whirlwind, a quieter, deeply personal part of Jeremiah's journey unfolded. During his study sessions and board meetings, he often thought of his family. His mother, a school teacher, had taught him the importance of education and kindness. His father, a mechanic with a passion for airplanes, had ignited his love for aviation. They had sacrificed much to help him get here, and Jeremiah vowed he would not disappoint them. He sometimes took long walks alone near the airport, staring up at jets streaking across the sky. He felt a kinship with them, the freedom of flying, yet the burdens of bearing the weight of so many lives, so many hopes. As the months passed, Jeremiah's confidence grew. He spearheaded a new campaign titled Fly Visible, aimed at amplifying diverse voices within the industry and encouraging young people to pursue careers in aviation regardless of their backgrounds. At a gala event for the campaign, Jeremiah shared a story that never failed to resonate. When I was kicked off my own plane, he said, I felt small, invisible, like the world had decided my hoodie defined me. But that moment didn't break me. It ignited a fire. It taught me that how we see each other and how we treat each other matters more than any rule written down on paper. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. Prejudice tries to ground us. But when we rise above it, when we choose empathy over judgment, we don't just reclaim our seats on a plane. We steer the entire course of history. Jeremiah's journey, from the humiliation in a cramped airport jet bridge to the heights of industry leadership, was a testament to the power of resilience, vision, and the refusal to let others define your worth. His hoodie was no longer just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of courage, change, and hope. And as Jeremiah looked toward the horizon from the window of his office, watching planes take off into the limitless sky, he knew this was only the beginning. Because the real flight, the one toward justice, equality, and dignity for all, was still climbing. I want to meet and talk. I realize now how wrong I was. Can we? Jeremiah hesitated but agreed. The next day, over coffee, Linda poured out her regrets, sharing how the encounter had unsettled her deeply. She spoke of the difficult conversations she faced with colleagues and the transformation she'd undergone since. I was part of the problem, she admitted, voice trembling, but I want to be part of the solution. Jeremiah saw in her the possibility of true change. When people confront uncomfortable truths and commit to growth, together, they worked to create an internal program at Phoenix Air where employees could discuss biases openly, fostering empathy and understanding across the company. As months passed, the airline's culture shifted visibly. Passengers noted friendlier, more thoughtful service. Employee turnover dropped. Jeremiah's leadership was no longer questioned but celebrated. Yet, through it all, Jeremiah never forgot why he started. The day he was kicked off his own plane for a hoodie. It was a stark reminder of prejudice's persistence and the urgent need for change. Standing before a crowd at a global aviation summit, Jeremiah spoke with steady passion, eyes bright, Prejudice tries to ground us. But when we rise above it, we don't just reclaim our seats, we change the course of the entire flight. The applause was thunderous. Jeremiah smiled, knowing this was only the beginning. Months after the summit, Jeremiah's vision unfolded beyond Phoenix Air. His story, now a beacon for social change, reached the ears of policymakers and activists alike. Invitations poured in panel discussions, community forums, even legislative hearings where his insight was sought on combating systemic bias. Yet Jeremiah remained grounded. One afternoon, returning to the city after visiting his youth initiative, he spotted a young boy sitting alone near the airport terminal, wearing a worn hoodie and clutching a backpack. Memories of his own vulnerable teenage days flooded back. He approached gently. "Hey there, what's your name?" The boy looked up, wary but curious. "Darius." Jeremiah smiled. "Darius, I've been where you are. It's not always easy to feel seen or safe. But trust me, you belong here. And you have the power to change your story." That moment crystallized everything Jeremiah had fought for. His journey had become cyclical, from being judged for a hoodie to inspiring the next generation to wear theirs with pride. From the terminal to the boardroom, from adversity to empowerment, Jeremiah Walker's flight was far from over. He was not just the owner of an airline. He was the pilot steering countless lives toward a future where everyone could soar without fear. The sky was the limit, and at last, the world was ready to fly. The air was thick with anticipation as Jeremiah stepped into the expansive conference hall packed with industry leaders, social activists, journalists, and young entrepreneurs. The Phoenix Air logo glowed behind him on a massive screen, symbolizing not just a company, but a movement. Tonight, Jeremiah was to receive the Changemaker Award, an honor recognizing those who had pushed boundaries and reshaped narratives. But away from the applause and flashing cameras, Jeremiah remained reflective. His journey from a 16-year-old kicked off his own plane for wearing a hoodie to a visionary leader was still unfolding, and its challenges were far from over. He remembered that day too vividly. The cold gaze of the flight attendant, the murmurs of the passengers, the sharp sting of humiliation as he was escorted from the very plane he owned. The hoodie was just fabric, yet it symbolized a barrier built from years of prejudice and assumptions, walls that had to be torn down. Determined to change things, Jeremiah had launched the Phoenix Youth Initiative, a program to mentor young people like him, often judged by society before they could even speak. It gave scholarships, internships at the airline, and leadership workshops, creating a sanctuary of hope and empowerment. But with progress came resistance. Some of Phoenix Air's longtime employees bristled at the sudden changes. They whispered in back halls about kids making decisions. Old-school managers called the diversity programs distractions, and some flight attendants grumbled about new training requirements. The media scrutinized Jeremiah, questioning whether a teenager could genuinely lead a large-scale airline. When the headlines questioned his capability, Jeremiah stayed even-keeled. Leadership, he knew, was more than managing airplanes and schedules. It was about managing people's hearts and minds. One afternoon, Linda, the flight attendant who had once asked him to remove his hoodie, approached him after a company meeting. She was nervous, her usual confident demeanor replaced by humility. "I want to apologize," she said. "That day, I judged you unfairly. You opened my eyes, not just to my biases, but to how Phoenix Air can be better." Jeremiah smiled, seeing in her the change he wanted for the whole company. "Thank you, Linda. It's not just about apologies, it's about what we do next." Together, they helped launch an internal dialogue group, where employees could share stories and experiences about biases they faced or exhibited. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Meanwhile, back at the Phoenix Youth Initiative, Jeremiah continued to pour energy into mentoring the first cohort of students. Malik, one of the scholarship recipients, spoke often of the courage Jeremiah inspired. "Sometimes I feel like people see my hoodie and make decisions about me before they know me," Malik confided one day during a workshop. "But you showed me it's okay to own who you are, even if they don't understand." Jeremiah nodded knowingly. It's not about changing yourself to fit their ideas. It's about changing their ideas. One of the stories that stuck with Jeremiah most was from a young girl named Aisha. She dreamed of becoming a pilot since she was 5 but felt pushed aside on account of her age and background. Through the initiative, she earned her internship and began flight training under Phoenix Air's guidance, a testament to the doors opened by persistence and belief. As the initiative gained momentum, so too did Jeremiah's efforts to reshape Phoenix Air's corporate culture. He insisted that policies be transparent and fair, that dress code guidelines be reasonable and respectful of individual expression, and that diversity be celebrated rather than tolerated. He also struck partnerships with civil rights organizations, sponsoring events and providing funding to support communities historically marginalized in the aviation industry. Despite the triumphs, Jeremiah faced moments of doubt. The weight of responsibility, the glare of public attention, and occasional backlash tested his resolve. Media outlets sometimes sensationalized the Hoodie incident as a mere PR stunt or questioned whether a teenager could truly get it done. Yet every time he felt the pressure, Jeremiah reminded himself why he started. One particularly challenging day came when a viral video surfaced showing another passenger, a young black man, being similarly treated unjustly by airline staff elsewhere. It was a painful echo of Jeremiah's own experience, proving that prejudice was far from erased in the skies. He responded swiftly, announcing a coalition of airlines committed to anti-discrimination training and sharing best practices. He spoke at press conferences, urging competitors to join forces in the fight for equality. Flying should be a human right, not a privilege granted to those who fit an outdated mold, he declared passionately. The industry took notice. Phoenix Air emerged as a pioneer, and Jeremiah as a leader whose influence extended well beyond his company. Amid the whirlwind, a quieter, deeply personal part of Jeremiah's journey unfolded. During his study sessions and board meetings, he often thought of his family. His mother, a school teacher, had taught him the importance of education and kindness. His father, a mechanic with a passion for airplanes, had ignited his love for aviation. They had sacrificed much to help him get here, and Jeremiah vowed he would not disappoint them. He sometimes took long walks alone near the airport, staring up at jets streaking across the sky. He felt a kinship with them, the freedom of flying, yet the burdens of bearing the weight of so many lives, so many hopes. As the months passed, Jeremiah's confidence grew. He spearheaded a new campaign titled Fly Visible, aimed at amplifying diverse voices within the industry and encouraging young people to pursue careers in aviation regardless of their backgrounds. At a gala event for the campaign, Jeremiah shared a story that never failed to resonate. When I was kicked off my own plane, he said, I felt small, invisible, like the world had decided my hoodie defined me. But that moment didn't break me. It ignited a fire. It taught me that how we see each other and how we treat each other matters more than any rule written down on paper. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. Prejudice tries to ground us. But when we rise above it, when we choose empathy over judgment, we don't just reclaim our seats on a plane. We steer the entire course of history. Jeremiah's journey, from the humiliation in a cramped airport jet bridge to the heights of industry leadership, was a testament to the power of resilience, vision, and the refusal to let others define your worth. His hoodie was no longer just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of courage, change, and hope. And as Jeremiah looked toward the horizon from the window of his office, watching planes take off into the limitless sky, he knew this was only the beginning. Because the real flight, the one toward justice, equality, and dignity for all, was still climbing. After months of steady progress, Phoenix Air was no longer just an airline. It had become a symbol of hope and resilience. Jeremiah's vision had transformed a company, but more importantly, it had touched countless lives. Still, Jeremiah knew that true change required persistence beyond policies and programs. One brisk morning, Jeremiah found himself sitting in a community hall in a low-income neighborhood miles from the gleaming runways of the airport. The seats were filled with young faces brimming with curiosity and dreams. They had come for Jeremiah's Fly Visible outreach event, a chance for him to speak not just as a CEO, but as a young man who understood their struggles. He looked around the room. Many wore hoodies, some patched and faded, some new and bright. To Jeremiah, they were all symbols of potential, not threat. Clearing his throat, he began. When I was 16, I was kicked off my own plane for wearing a hoodie. Not because I was doing anything wrong, but because someone saw me and made assumptions that didn't know who I really was. A hush settled as he continued. That moment changed everything for me. It's why I started Phoenix Air the way I did. It's why I launched the Youth Initiative. Because I believe the world should judge us by our character, our actions, and our dreams, not by what we wear or where we come from. Hands raised across the room. Questions about aviation, about leadership, about overcoming obstacles poured in, and Jeremiah answered each one with honesty and encouragement. Later, as he stepped outside, a young girl tugged on his sleeve. Sir, she said shyly, do you think someone like me could ever be a pilot? Jeremiah smiled. remembering the doubt he himself had once faced. I don't just think it, I know it. And I hope to see you flying those skies one day. Back at Phoenix Air headquarters, Jeremiah continued his quiet revolution. New pilot training scholarships were awarded. A diversity council was formed, giving a platform to voices once unheard. Policies were rewritten to promote inclusion and fairness across every level. Of course, challenges remained. Public scrutiny and internal resistance did not vanish overnight. But Jeremiah's unyielding optimism inspired a culture where mistakes became lessons, and lessons became growth. One evening, as Jeremiah closed his laptop, an email notification popped up, a message from Malik, now a confident intern at Phoenix Air. "Thank you for believing in me," Malik wrote. "Because of you, I'm not just dreaming anymore. I'm flying." Jeremiah closed his eyes for a moment, humility and pride mixing in his chest. His fight had started with a single, painful moment of exclusion, but it had grown into a journey that lifted others to soar. He knew the sky held endless possibilities. And for him, for Phoenix Air, and for every young person daring to dream, the future was wide open. Months later, Jeremiah found himself in a quiet moment of reflection at the very airport where his journey had once felt so uncertain. The terminal was bustling as always, but to him, this place now symbolized much more than travel. It was a crossroads of hope, change, and resilience. He remembered clearly the sting of being asked to leave that flight. At 16, beneath the weight of judgment, he had felt small and invisible. Yet that moment had fueled a fire inside him, a determination to change not only his own destiny but to dismantle the barriers that boxed so many others in. Since then, Phoenix Air had blossomed into an airline known across the country not just for its routes or service, but for its values, a company where diversity was celebrated and dignity fiercely protected. The youth initiative had grown, too. Young leaders, many wearing hoodies as their symbol of pride rather than stigma, were carving spaces for themselves in aviation and beyond. Jeremiah had spoken on stages he once only dreamed of, from local schools to international forums, always reminding the world that no piece of clothing, no stereotype, should ever define a person's worth or limit their dreams. On this day, as he walked through the arrivals hall, he spotted a group of teenagers excitedly awaiting their mentor. One of them recognized him immediately. "Mr. Walker," a girl called out, pulling him into their circle. "Thank you for believing in us." He knelt down, meeting their bright eyes. "You are the future. Remember, the world will try to tell you who you are, but it's your story to write." As he stood, Jeremiah looked up at the massive departures board, watching planes light up, ready to take flight. In a way, those jets mirrored the young lives he'd helped to lift, so many journeys just beginning, soaring toward endless skies once shadowed by doubt. The hoodie no longer hung heavy on his shoulders. It had become a banner of courage, a reminder that sometimes, the most powerful flights start on the ground beneath misunderstood fabrics and prejudiced eyes. And Jeremiah Walker? He was ready to keep flying, higher, farther, and with a heart committed to lifting others with him, because true leadership, he knew, was about giving everyone the chance to rise. As Phoenix Air soared in success, Jeremiah realized he had to do more than change his company. He had to influence the entire industry. He began reaching out to airline leaders across the country, proposing collaborative training programs focused on implicit bias and inclusion. Many were skeptical, but some saw in Jeremiah's experience and passion a spark worth igniting. At one industry conference, Jeremiah shared his story once more, not as a triumphant CEO, but as a young man who had faced the sting of prejudice firsthand. "I was kicked off my own plane for wearing a hoodie," he told the room, his voice steady. "But that moment wasn't the end for me. It was a beginning, a call to all of us to look beyond appearances, to recognize humanity first." The speech sparked conversations and commitments. Soon, several airlines partnered with Phoenix Air to create nationwide standards promoting equity and respect for passengers and employees alike. Back at Phoenix Air, Jeremiah's youth initiative expanded, bringing in students from all backgrounds. He personally mentored dozens, encouraging them to break ceilings and redefine what it means to lead. One day, as Jeremiah was walking through the terminal, he spotted a young boy wearing a hoodie emblazoned with the Phoenix Air logo. The boy caught his eye and grinned. Jeremiah smiled back, knowing the journey he began had lifted more than just an airline. It had lifted lives, and as planes took off into the endless sky, so too did dreams once held down by prejudice, now free to fly. The true flight had just begun. Jeremiah's rise from a teen wrongly kicked off his own flight for wearing a hoodie to an industry leader had become a story of remarkable transformation. But as the chapters of his life unfolded with breathtaking speed, he realized the work was far from complete. His vision stretched beyond Phoenix Air. He wanted to fundamentally change aviation's culture and, more broadly, the society that shaped it. The airport buzzed with the usual hustle of travelers, but to Jeremiah, it was a crossroads where countless lives intersected. Here, thousands of stories of hope, fear, and challenge played out every day, many shadowed by unspoken assumptions and unacknowledged biases. This was the front line in his fight, not just planes and flights, but the hearts and minds of millions. Phoenix Air's headquarters had become a beacon for change, renowned for diversity programs, mentorship initiatives, and its transparent approach to confronting prejudice. Yet Jeremiah knew that pockets of resistance remained, both inside his company and throughout the wider aviation world. Determined to amplify his impact, Jeremiah began organizing a coalition of willing airlines, a dedicated alliance intent on stamping out discrimination and redefining passenger and employee experiences. It wasn't easy. Industry veteran executives clung to old routines, skeptical that such efforts were necessary or even feasible. Some questioned whether a young CEO, barely out of his teens, could lead such an ambitious movement. That's just the way it's always been, one veteran executive argued during a tense meeting. We can't change human nature. Jeremiah listened carefully, then responded with calm conviction. We're not changing human nature, he said. We're changing culture. Culture is shaped by choice, by leadership, and by the courage to confront the uncomfortable truth. His words stirred contemplation. That day, he secured tentative commitments from 3 major airlines willing to pilot the coalition's initiatives, pioneers eager to prove it was possible. As months rolled by, the coalition launched groundbreaking programs. Joint trainings addressed implicit bias for thousands of employees, flight attendants, gate agents, ground staff, pilots alike. Passenger feedback systems were redesigned to elevate reports of discrimination, ensuring swift, transparent resolutions. Educational campaigns challenged stereotypes and celebrated diversity, showing the true faces behind every traveler. Phoenix Air became both a model and a mentor to others. Industry conferences featured Jeremiah sharing the story of the Hoodie, not as a humiliation, but as the spark for transformation. During one event, a middle-aged woman approached him afterward. She introduced herself as Anita, a senior flight attendant for a partner airline. I used to think diversity training was just a checkbox, she admitted. But hearing your story, seeing how it drives everything you do, it opened my eyes. I want to be part of that change. Her words echoed a growing wave of support. Employees across the coalition spoke of renewed pride, seeing their companies as places where respect wasn't just lip service, but a lived value. Back at Phoenix Air, Jeremiah dedicated increasing time to the youth initiative, expanding its reach to inner-city schools, tribal communities, and rural areas where aviation careers felt like distant dreams. One brisk autumn morning, Jeremiah traveled to a high school in Detroit. The students, diverse and eager, had followed his story with passion. He shared his journey candidly. The bullying, the heartbreak of prejudice, and the unyielding refusal to be defined by others. That a young girl named Zaria caught his attention. Quiet but attentive, she later shared her secret dream: to become an aerospace engineer. You remind me that even when the odds seem high, it's possible to soar, she told him afterward. Lee, another student, spoke about the stigma of his neighborhood and the hope Jeremiah's story seeded. For the first time, I think maybe I belong somewhere I never thought I could, he said simply. Jeremiah realized the youth initiative had planted seeds that, if nurtured, would blossom into generations of changemakers pushing beyond ceilings and skin-deep judgments. However, progress wasn't without its trials. Social media sometimes boiled over with negativity, accusations that Jeremiah's accomplishments overshadowed others or that his youth made him inexperienced. Certain factions dismissed the coalition's work as political posturing or virtue signaling. More dauntingly, a few high-profile incidents of discrimination emerged in partner airlines not fully committed to change. Videos circulated of passengers being harassed or removed unjustly. Critics used these moments to question whether the aviation industry was truly ready to evolve. Jeremiah responded with transparency and action. We cannot claim progress where it doesn't exist, he said during a widely broadcast interview. Acknowledging our failures is the first step to real reform. He promised audits, retraining, and measurable goals for all coalition members. His unapologetic stance won respect from many, but also raised the stakes for sustained effort. Despite the challenges, Jeremiah's personal life grew richer with each day's work. He reconnected with his family, sharing his triumphs and stresses. His mother's steady wisdom reminded him to balance ambition with empathy. His father's quiet pride grounded him in tradition even as he wrote new rules. Early one spring morning, Jeremiah stood by the runway, watching a Phoenix Air jet take off. It reminded him how far he'd come, from a teen forcibly removed for a hoodie to a man steering change on a national scale, that a call broke his reverie. Malik, now a confident intern-turned-junior pilot candidate, excitedly declared he'd just passed a critical flight exam. Jeremiah grinned. See? Dreams do take flight. On his desk lay a folder marked Fly Visible Expansion Proposal. The next chapter awaited. Jeremiah's story was now inseparable from a larger movement. He understood that one hoodie, one moment of injustice, had unveiled deep wounds in society. But more importantly, it revealed how courage could spark change. His vision extended beyond skies and terminals to a world where people were judged by their character, not their clothes, where respect was the flight path and opportunity the destination. And as he prepared to expand the Fly Visible initiative nationwide, partnering with schools, nonprofits, and industry leaders, Jeremiah felt a deep sense of purpose. The flight was not yet over. The journey was only beginning. Jeremiah's vision for the future had always extended far beyond the gleaming terminals of Phoenix Air. The Fly Visible initiative, the mentorship and empowerment program he dreamed up after his own painful experience, was no longer a fledgling project limited to a handful of inner-city schools. Now, as he stood at the helm of expanding the program nationwide, he felt the weight of both possibility and responsibility pressing upon his young shoulders. The conference room where the planning team gathered was buzzing with energy and urgency. Representatives from schools in Detroit, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Chicago, and even rural Appalachia dialed in, eager to be part of this movement. Fly Visible is not just about aviation, Jeremiah began, looking around at the eager faces, both in person and via video. It's about giving every young person, especially those who've been overlooked or underestimated, the chance to chart their own course. The hoodie I wore that day was a symbol, but it's not the hoodie that matters. It's what's underneath: potential, dreams, courage. Maya, now one of Phoenix Air's lead trainers, nodded beside him. Our goal is to create safe spaces where students see themselves as leaders, pilots, engineers, entrepreneurs, and where they're free from the biases that try to hold them down. The first few months were a whirlwind of logistics and outreach. Jeremiah and his team worked tirelessly to coordinate scholarships, internships, transportation, and training workshops, all designed with an eye toward accessibility and inclusion. His phone was flooded daily with messages from eager students, frustrated teachers, and parents thankful for the opportunity. The stories poured in. Malik, who was now flying as a trainee pilot, struggling with stereotypes but buoyed by Jeremiah's mentoring. Aisha, the aspiring aerospace engineer, who had just been accepted to a prestigious university program. And Zaria, who had started a coding club at her high school inspired by Phoenix Air's tech internship. But the expansion was not without setbacks in one Midwestern town. The local school board debated whether Phoenix Air's program aligned with the community's values. Some members called it too political or divisive, questioning what a private airline had to do with education policy. Jeremiah himself received harsh criticism in op-eds accusing him of pushing a personal agenda. "What's happened to this airline?" one columnist asked, deriding the emphasis on social engineering over profit. He absorbed the criticisms quietly, but felt their sting. In a rare, quiet moment, he confided in Maya, "Sometimes it feels like no matter how much good we do, there will always be those who want to hold us back." She smiled gently. "That just means you're on the right track. Change isn't comfortable for everyone. The question is, do you want to do what's easy or what's right?" With renewed determination, Jeremiah doubled down on outreach. He visited small towns, meeting parents, educators, and students face-to-face. He listened to their fears and hopes, always emphasizing the program's core message: opportunity and respect for all. One particularly memorable visit was to a rural Appalachian high school, where few students had ever dreamed of aviation careers. When he walked into the auditorium, dozens of shy teenagers sat unsure what to expect. Jeremiah began by sharing his story, not the polished Theo version, but his raw memories of exclusion and resilience. He pulled back his hoodie to reveal a scar on his wrist, the mark of long hours spent working behind the scenes to build the airline he'd inherited. "You don't have to fit someone else's mold to be worthy," he told them. "The world will try to put you in boxes, judge you by the wrong things. But your dreams, your courage, those can't be contained." Afterward, dozens of students crowded around to ask questions and talk about their own aspirations. Jeremiah stayed late, taking selfies, shaking hands, promising to store their stories close to his heart. Back at Phoenix Air, the ripple effect from Fly Visible was tangible. Employee satisfaction soared as the airline's culture grew more inclusive. Training programs evolved beyond bias awareness, focusing on active allyship and systemic change. Jeremiah's leadership won industry awards, but he prized most the letters from young program alumni who wrote about internships, college acceptances, and new confidence. Still, the media circus never fully faded. Some outlets twisted his efforts into caricatures or questioned his youth. One morning, a harsh headline stopped him cold. "Boy CEO plays race card to promote airline." He stared at the screen, breath tightening. Yet instead of retreating, Jeremiah chose to speak in an exclusive interview. He laid bare his motivations. "My race card is my story, the story of a teenager judged by a hoodie instead of his humanity. It fuels my passion to ensure no one else is forced to endure that pain. This isn't politics. It's empathy. It's justice." The public's response surprised even him. Many rallied behind his candor. The conversation shifted, slowly but meaningfully. His enduring message was clear. Change is uncomfortable. Progress demands courage. And leadership is about lifting others, not just oneself. Late one spring evening, seated at his desk with city lights sparkling below, Jeremiah reflected on how far he had come, and how far the journey yet stretched. He was no longer just the teen who had been kicked off his own plane. He was a force for transformation. Yet that boy and his hoodie remained his compass, a reminder of the power of vulnerability to spark courage. And while the sky was vast and sometimes stormy, Jeremiah's resolve remained steady. With the future unfolding before him, glorious and uncertain, he whispered quietly to himself, "This is only the beginning." Jeremiah woke to the soft hum of the city outside his window, the first light of dawn glimmering over the skyline. As the founder of Phoenix Air and the architect of the Fly Visible initiative, his days were packed with meetings and decisions that could impact thousands. But today, he felt an unusual stillness, a moment where the relentless whirlwind slowed just long enough for reflection. The past year had been a whirlwind of growth, challenges, and transformation, both for the airline and for Jeremiah himself. The seeds he planted with Fly Visible had sprouted beyond his wildest dreams. Schools across the nation had embraced the program. A diverse wave of young people, many from backgrounds once overlooked, were entering aviation careers, breaking through barriers that once seemed unyielding. Still, some moments lingered. Etched into his memory with sharp clarity, he remembered the day a nervous young woman named Aisha ran up to him after a community event. Her eyes shone bright with hope. She told him she was the first in her family to attend college and was now pursuing engineering at a top program, inspired by Phoenix Air's internship. Her words carved through the noise. "You showed me that who I am is enough and that I have a place in this world." Jeremiah smiled, holding on to that warmth as he prepared to head into a board meeting focused on expanding the airline's sustainability initiatives alongside its social impact programs. As he entered the sleek conference room, executives ambled in, some visibly energized by the pilot projects underway, others skeptical of the resources poured into what they deemed soft initiatives. Jeremiah took his seat at the head of the table, clearing his throat. "Today, we face an opportunity, not only to grow as a business, but to redefine what success means in aviation," he began. "Sustainability and inclusion are not separate goals. They're interconnected threads of a future where Phoenix Air leads, not just in market share, but in shaping a better world." A few heads nodded, but a query from an older executive broke the silence. "Jeremiah, how do you address doubts that these initiatives distract from profitability? Shareholders want returns." Jeremiah met the gaze steadily. "Profits follow purpose. When employees feel valued and communities are engaged, loyalty rises. Customers increasingly choose brands that align with their values. We aren't just building an airline, we're building trust. That trust is our greatest asset. The discussion deepened, weaving together plans to reduce carbon emissions and commitments to bolster diversity in leadership roles, ensuring the airline reflected the people it served. After the meeting, Jeremiah retreated to his office, his thoughts turning toward FlyVisible. 2 new applications awaited his review, one from a shy teenager in Mississippi dreaming of becoming a pilot, and another from a young coder in Alaska passionate about aerospace technology. A soft knock interrupted him. Malik stepped in, now a confident junior pilot trainee, a product of Phoenix Air's mentorship. "Mr. Walker," Malik began, "I wanted to share a story. Yesterday, after a long day of training, I boarded a flight wearing my hoodie. An older passenger gave me a hard look, the same kind of look I used to get before your program. But this time, I smiled, remembered your words, and sat proud. No apologies." Jeremiah's chest swelled with pride. "That's the spirit, Malik. Wearing our identity with pride is a quiet revolution." They talked late into the afternoon about challenges, triumphs, and the responsibility Malik now felt to inspire others. That evening, Jeremiah hosted a virtual town hall with FlyVisible students and alumni. The glowing faces sharing their stories, internships, scholarships, college acceptances, were living proof that change was more than rhetoric. Suddenly, a question from a hesitant voice broke through. "How do you deal with people who don't want to change? Who judge before they understand?" Jeremiah smiled gently, recalling the day he was kicked off his flight. "That's the hardest part," he admitted. "Change isn't a straight path. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes met with resistance. But every conversation, every act of empathy chips away at bias. We don't need to change everyone at once, just enough to build momentum." The night deepened, filled with hope and resolve. Months turned to a year, and Phoenix Air's culture transformed measurably. The airline won awards for social responsibility and inclusion, but more importantly, employees reported feeling seen and heard. Passengers noticed an uplift in service marked by genuine respect. Jeremiah's story, once a shocking headline about a teen kicked off his own plane, had become a rallying cry for justice across industries. Still, atop all success lay Jeremiah's quiet conviction. This was only the beginning. As the moon rose, he gazed through his office window at Phoenix Air's jet silhouetted against the night sky. Tomorrow, new journeys would begin, flights carrying dreams lifted higher than ever before. And Jeremiah? He would keep flying forward, a young leader shaping a future where respect and opportunity soared for all. Jeremiah's schedule had rarely allowed for moments of quiet reflection, but today was different. The flight schedules, meetings, and endless conference calls had paused for just a few hours, offering him a chance to walk through the bustling airport concourse without the watchful eyes of staff or reporters. He moved among a sea of travelers, families reuniting, business people hurrying to gates, children clutching favorite toys. Each carried their own hopes, dreams, and stories, many hidden beneath layers of judgment like the black hoodie that had once defined his own experience. As he passed a small coffee kiosk, Jeremiah caught the eye of a teenage boy wearing a worn hoodie emblazoned with a small Phoenix Air patch. The boy's eyes met Jeremiah's as if he recognized a kindred spirit. Emboldened, the boy approached hesitantly. "Mr. Walker?" he asked quietly. "I'm Devin. I heard about your story in school. You make me believe maybe I can do something bigger too." Jeremiah smiled warmly, crouching down to meet Devin's gaze directly. "Devin, you can do anything. It's not about where you come from or what you wear. It's about what's inside you." The decision to rise above. Devin smiled shyly before waving goodbye and slipping back into the crowd. The encounter lingered in Jeremiah's thoughts as he continued walking, reminding him of the very reason this journey was more than just corporate success. Back at headquarters, Jeremiah dove into planning the next phase of FlyVisible, a national conference bringing together students, mentors, industry leaders, and policy advocates. It was designed as a living initiative, workshops on aviation careers, leadership panels, and interactive sessions addressing systemic barriers. His hope was that attendees would leave not only inspired but equipped with tools to break ceilings in their own lives. However, scaling an initiative brought complicated challenges. Funding opportunities, partnerships, and outreach required meticulous coordination. Skeptics still questioned the efficacy and scope of his vision. Some airline partners hesitated to join the coalition, weighing political and cultural backlash against progress. The media spotlight, once a source of validation, was now often a crucible of criticism. One afternoon, Jeremiah sat with the Phoenix Air executive team reviewing the feedback from partner schools. A few administrators expressed discomfort with the program's emphasis on confronting bias, preferring a more neutral approach. "We don't want to stir controversy," one coordinator explained. "Some parents see this as pushing an agenda." Jeremiah listened carefully, then chose his words with care. "Change is uncomfortable precisely because it challenges the status quo. But staying silent has cost us too much. To prepare these young leaders, we must teach them to face discomfort, to become catalysts for growth, not bystanders." The room fell silent, and while the discussion remained tense, a shared understanding began to emerge. Progress often demanded difficult conversations. Outside the boardroom, Jeremiah confided in Maya, his trusted trainer and friend. "Sometimes it feels like we're pushing a boulder uphill." Maya nodded knowingly. "I've seen that look before on your face that day they kicked you off the plane. But you're not alone anymore. We've got wings now. And wings always find a way to fly." He smiled, drawing strength from those words. The conference day arrived with bright skies and nervous energy filling the large auditorium. Jeremiah stood at the podium, facing hundreds of expectant young faces. He began with the story that had become his anchor: the hoodie, the flight attendant, the humiliation. But more than pain, he spoke of resilience and the power in rewriting narratives. "Each of you is here because you refuse to be measured by anyone else's stereotypes," he said. "Your potential isn't about fitting preconceived notions. It's about your courage, your vision, and your willingness to lead." Workshops sparked lively debate, mentoring sessions forged lasting bonds, and voices long silenced found new strength. The conference was a microcosm of hope, a platform not just to dream but to equip. Weeks later, Jeremiah received a letter from a young woman named Amina, one of the attendees. She wrote, "Because of Fly Visible, I'm starting my training to become an aerospace engineer. Your story taught me that my hoodie is part of my strength, not my weakness. Thank you for showing me I belong in skies too." Jeremiah read the words beneath the warm glow of his desk lamp, feeling the immense reach of a single courageous act. As night settled over the city, Jeremiah looked out from his office window. The vast horizon stretched endlessly, just like the journeys he wished for countless others. His hoodie, once a symbol of judgment, was now woven into the fabric of change, and as planes soared into the night sky, carrying dreams and defying limits, Jeremiah vowed to keep flying. Higher, farther, ever forward. Because true leadership is not the destination, but the ongoing journey of lifting others to their own heights. Jeremiah's journey had been nothing short of extraordinary, but as the seasons turned, he understood the real test of his vision was only beginning. Phoenix Air had grown into a symbol of change, yet the work of transforming attitudes, dismantling systemic barriers, and lifting others was an uphill flight with turbulence at every turn. One crisp autumn morning, Jeremiah arrived at a community center in a small Ohio town, a place far from the polished terminals he was accustomed to. This was where the heart of Fly Visible now pulsed strongest, a grassroots movement empowering young people who once felt invisible in industries that seemed designed without them in mind. The last few years had taught him that real change wasn't just built from corporate boardrooms or media moments. It lived in classrooms, mentorship sessions, and moments of everyday courage. Inside, a crowd of eager faces looked up as he entered. Teens in hoodies, scarves, and smiles filled the room, each one carrying a dream and a battle of their own. Jeremiah smiled. "This is why I do what I do. Every one of you has the power to change not only your own story, but the story of an entire community." He shared his own story again, not as a polished CEO, but as a kid who had been judged unfairly, yet refused to be silenced. Then he listened to their struggles dealing with assumptions, fears, and the barriers that still demanded breaking. Among the crowd was a young girl named Nia, quiet but fierce in her resolve to become a pilot. Later, she approached Jeremiah with a trembling voice. "The odds seem stacked against me," she said. "How do you keep believing, even when the world doubts you?" Jeremiah looked her in the eyes. "Belief is a flame that must be nurtured. Sometimes, when the wind blows hard, you have to shield it carefully, but never let it go out. Surround yourself with people who fuel your flame. Find your own reasons to keep flying. And remember, you belong anywhere you dare to dream." Nia nodded, eyes shining. "I'll hold on to that." Back in corporate headquarters, Phoenix Air rolled out a new initiative, a labor program to amplify employee voices in shaping company culture. Jeremiah knew that true progress meant building bridges internally as well. He invited employees at every level, pilots, cabin crew, ground staff, to participate in open forums. The goal was clear: foster a culture of empathy, accountability, and ongoing growth. Not all conversations were comfortable. Some employees shared stories of moments where they felt sidelined or judged. Some admitted to unconscious biases they hadn't confronted before. But those first frank moments laid the foundation for progress. Jeremiah watched these forums grow from tentative beginnings into vibrant spaces of healing, learning, and empowerment. He believed change started with honesty and humility, yet challenges persisted. A local TV station ran a segment questioning whether Phoenix Air's diversity initiatives compromised safety or professionalism. Competitors mocked the airline as a feel-good experiment. Share prices dipped during periods of criticism, and Jeremiah faced sleepless nights balancing pressure from stakeholders with his mission. But he never wavered. At a town hall meeting with shareholders, Jeremiah laid his case bare. "This is about more than profits," he said passionately. "It's about pioneering an airline and a world that respects humanity at every level." Sustainable growth and true inclusion are not opposites. They feed each other. The room broke into applause, with many shareholders acknowledging that long-term success required vision beyond short-term earnings. Meanwhile, inside the airline, tangible changes took root. Recruitment pipelines diversified. Mentorship networks connected seasoned professionals to newcomers from all walks of life. Passenger feedback revealed improved satisfaction and a growing reputation for kindness and respect. Malik, now one of Phoenix Air's youngest first officers, often spoke at conferences, recounting how the airline's ethos helped him overcome obstacles. His pride in wearing the company hoodie was no small defiance. "It was a statement of belonging to in one memorable moment," Malik said during a panel. "When I first wore that hoodie, it carried the weight of judgment. Now, it carries the weight of expectation, to be a leader, to inspire, and to carry forward those who come after." Jeremiah's heart swelled hearing those words. One evening, as he prepared for the airline's anniversary gala, Jeremiah stood looking out over a crowded ballroom. Stories of success, resilience, and transformation echoed through conversations and awards. Students who had once been told they didn't belong now held scholarships and leadership titles. Employees who once felt invisible now shaped policy. Yet Jeremiah knew his flight was far from complete. The world still wrestled with prejudice, inequity, and fear. But with every story shared, every barrier broken, and every life uplifted, momentum grew. Taking the stage, Jeremiah raised his voice one last time that evening. "To every young person out there who has ever been judged unfairly, to every employee and ally fighting for dignity, to every dreamer facing a storm, know this: you belong. Your dreams are valid. Your worth is undiminished by the opinions or fears of others." The crowd rose in a standing ovation as the applause washed over him. Jeremiah smiled quietly. That night, he wasn't just the CEO of an airline. He was a beacon of hope, proof that one moment of injustice could spark a flight toward a horizon defined by courage, compassion, and the unshakable belief in the power of every human being to rise. And as the city lights twinkled beneath the endless sky, Jeremiah's journey soared onward, ever forward, ever higher. Jeremiah sat quietly in his office, the city lights twinkling beyond the window, a reflective calm settling over him. That moment on the plane, the humiliation, the silent stares, the cold dismissal, had become the catalyst for a movement far greater than he had imagined. Phoenix Air was no longer just an airline. It was a beacon of change, a testament to confronting prejudice head-on and choosing empathy over assumption. His journey, from a boy in a hoodie kicked off his own plane to a leader inspiring thousands, was proof that true strength lies not in power alone, but in the courage to rewrite one's story and lift others as you rise. Jeremiah knew the sky still held challenges, systemic barriers, biases waiting in shadows. But with every young life empowered, every conversation sparked, and every mind opened, the horizon grew wider. Looking out into the night, Jeremiah whispered to himself, a promise and a prayer: "This flight, His flight was far from over, and he would keep soaring, fearless and unbound, until everyone could fly free. The end.